Today I'm going to discuss sexually transmitted diseases and their pathogens. Now, STDs are a worldwide problem. Mostly the patients, especially the females, are asymptomatic and they constitute a major reservoir for these infections. Despite the fact that we know a lot about STDs and their pathogens, it is still on the rise. And there are several factors which are contributing towards it. For example, changing sexual behaviors, homosexualities, multiple sex partners, etc., are all contributing towards these infections. Increased mobility, people carrying the disease are moving from one part of the world to another. Then the stigma which is attached to STDs, mostly the people or the patients don't consult a doctor and they try to treat it at home, leading to various complications, and still no vaccine is available for most of these pathogens. Hence it is something very important and it is seen as a global problem. Now, what are these sexually transmitted diseases? These are the diseases which are transmitted through sexual contact between people or transmitted through exchange of semen, blood, or other body fluids, or they could be a direct body contact with the lesions, infected lesions. And these sexually transmitted diseases are also known as venereal diseases. Regarding their transmission, 95% transmission is horizontal, that is by sexual contact. It could also be vertical. Infected mothers are going to transmit the disease to the fetus, and this is known as transplacental. Then there could be non-specific contacts like infected lesions. From infected lesions, the doctors can infect the patients, or the infants can get infected from the parents or from the adults. This slide is showing you the top 10 sexually transmitted diseases, which are very important because you get an SCQ. Part of your SCQ is on like endless 2 bacterial and 2 viral and a protozoal or fungal STD and their pathogen or the causative agent. So you need to know this list. This list is very important. Bacterial STDs are caused by Neisseria gonorrhoeae, which is responsible for gonorrhea, and we are going to discuss this in detail now. We have already done Treponema pallidum, responsible for syphilis, Chlamydia trachomatis, D2K serotypes, responsible for non-specific urethritis, Chlamydia trachomatis, L1, L2, L3 serotypes, responsible for lymphogranuloma venereum, and Haemophilus duclei, which is responsible for chancroid. Coming to the viral pathogens, human papilloma virus is the most important. It is responsible for genital warts, dysplasia, and cancer of the penis or the cervix or vagina. Herpes simplex 2 is responsible for genital herpes. HIV is responsible for AIDS, and hepatitis B virus is responsible for hepatitis. Similarly, in protozoa, Trichomonas vaginalis is responsible for trichomoniasis, and Candida albicans is responsible for vaginal thrush. We have done all these in detail while we were doing virology or parasitology or mycology. So it is all finished and we are now going to move on to Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Now, what is Neisseria gonorrhoeae? Neisseria gonorrhoeae is an infection which is caused by Neisseria species. Let's go back to the species of Neisseria. I told you in my previous lecture while we were doing Neisseria meningitidis that the two human pathogens are number one Neisseria gonorrhoeae, responsible for gonorrhea, and meningitidis, which we have already done, and it is responsible for meningitis. But there are several other normal Neisseria commensals, which are a normal resident of the mucous membrane, and they are not causing any disease as such. So the two important are Neisseria gonorrhoeae and Neisseria meningitidis. Coming to your learning objective, at the end of this session, all of you should be familiar with the morphology, the pathogenicity determinants, or the factors which are responsible for disease production. How is disease produced? Pathogenesis. You should know about not only the clinical manifestations but also the complications associated with this pathogen. And generally, you get a question on the complications and the pathogenesis. Plus, obviously, I've been telling you that lab diagnosis is very important. You should know what ophthalmia neonatorum is. We have already done this while we were doing chlamydia species. So there are two organisms basically responsible for ophthalmia neonatorum, and again you are asked about it in your exams. Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Now this pathogen is responsible for gonorrhea, which is one of the most prevalent sexually transmitted disease. Gonorrhea means flow of seed because there is penile discharge of purulent material, so it is called gonorrhea. It has been described as early, it was described in fact as early as AD 130. Other diseases are also associated with Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and these are like pharyngitis, arthritis, or ophthalmia neonatorum, which I have just told you, which is acquired during vaginal delivery. This organism is only seen in man, and it is going to infect the genital tract in human and is sexually transmitted. Now, this slide is showing you the type of question that you see in the exam. Here you can see a sex worker coming with history of excessive vaginal discharge and irregular bleed. Vaginal secretion show gram-negative intracellular diplococci, and the examiner wants to know what is the most likely diagnosis, give the pathogenesis of this organism, what is ophthalmia neonatorum, what are the two organisms responsible for this condition, what is the diagnosis and complication associated with Neisseria. So Neisseria gonorrhoeae. So this is going to cover the entire topic, and you can get a question on any of what I have written over here. Coming to its general morphology, just like Neisseria meningitidis, they are also gram-negative diplococci. They are kidney bean shaped with a long axis parallel to one another. They are also non-motile, non-sporing, and non-acid fast. Now, they are different from meningitidis because the capsule is rarely seen. However, they have pili. Now, these pili, 5 types have been identified, T1 to T5, and they are responsible for virulence of this organism. Secondly, plasmids have been seen in Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and they are responsible for conjugation and thus bring about resistant or drug resistant associated with this organism, and they are also going to produce beta lactamase, which make them resistant to penicillins. These are oxidase and catalase positive, just like Neisseria meningitidis, and they require 5 to 10% carbon dioxide for their growth. Regarding their growth and metabolism, they are highly fastidious organisms, and they require enriched or selective media for their growth. They readily are autolyzed outside the body, and there's a misconcept that you can get gonorrhea from toilet seat. These organisms cannot survive long outside the human host, and they are quickly killed by drying, light, or by cold. Coming to the virulence factors of this bacteria, as you can see over here, this slide is showing you the different pathogenicity determinants or virulent factors of Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Number one is the spilus. The spilus, as you can see over here, is basically going to help in attachment of this pathogen to the mucosal epithelium. It has these hypervariable regions, and just like we talked about hypervariable region with immunoglobulins, so they are responsible for antigenic diversity seen in Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Protein A is going to form spores through the outer membrane. These are also antigenic in type, and various serotypes have been associated with virulence. Then we have these lipo-oligosaccharides, and they are lipid A, responsible for the endotoxic activity of this bacteria. IgA protease plays a very important role because this is released from this pathogen. It is going to destroy IgA immunoglobulin and are going to expose the receptor to this pathogen, and hence there is attachment and colonization to to the different receptor sites. So, as I said, pili are going to allow the organism to colonize. Lipo-oligosaccharides are going to bring about inflammation or endotoxic shock. Outer membrane proteins are responsible for adhesions, and IgA protease is going to destroy the mucosal IgA and help in colonization of this pathogen. Coming to the pathogenesis, or how is infection caused by Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Now, These organisms, as you can see over here, by means of their pili, they are going to get attached to the columnar epithelial cells present in the urethra or in the cervix, in the pharynx, rectum, or the conjunctiva. The gonococci, as they enter after sexual contact, by means of these pili, they are getting attached to the receptors on the non-ciliated epithelial cells. These epithelial cells are non-ciliated. And once they get attached to this, they are this attachment is further, the spread is facilitated by IgA protease and protein 1. The organisms are going to traverse the intracellular spaces and they are going to reach this subepithelial connective tissue within 72 hours. And they are going to bring about intense inflammatory response, which is basically rich in polymorphs, as you see over here on this slide. And the exudate which is formed is now going to obstruct the glands and the ducts, resulting in abscess or cyst formation. The spread further occurs either by direct extension, it goes into the bloodstream and is carried to the different organs, or via the lymphatics, it would be carried again to different parts. And that is going to lead to disseminated gonococcal infection. So this is infection or pathogenesis by Neisseria gonorrhoeae. You get a question on the pathogenesis where you either give it diagrammatically or you can write it down as such, where the primary infection, mainly the columnar epithelium, is involved, which is seen in all these structures, urethra, cervix, pharynx, etc. Initial attachment is by means of pili to the receptors, and the spread is obviously, or attachment is further facilitated by IgA proteins, protein 1, etc. The organism is going to pass through the intracellular spaces, go and enter, go to the subepithelial connective tissue, where they are going to bring about this intense inflammatory response, and this exudate is going to obstruct the glands, etc., and spread is either by direct extension or lymphatics, and that is going to bring about disseminated gonococcal infection, which is a complication of this pathogen. So the clinical manifestation is genital gonorrhea, and the complication is pelvic inflammatory disease and disseminated gonococcal infections. We are going to discuss all this in detail because you again get an SCQ on this part. Coming to genital gonorrhea, depending on whether there's the individual, there's heterosexual individual or homosexual individuals, the signs and symptoms would be different, and similarly it would be different in males and in females. With heterosexual men, 90% are symptomatic and there is extensive urethral discharge. The patient may present with dysuria. There is painful urination, cream, greenish, this pus discharge, and there is testicular pain. Long-term effects are epididymitis or infection of the epididymis, and there is going to be sterility. In case of females, the short-term effect is excessive pus-like vaginal discharge, as you can see over here. There is again painful urination, intramenstrual bleeding, lower abdominal pain, etc. And if the patient is not treated, the female is going to develop pelvic inflammatory disease. There is ectopic pregnancy because of scarring of the tubes, and this can also lead to sterility. In homosexual, there is involvement of the rectum or the pharynx or the eyes are involved. Rectal infection leads to tenesmus, which is painful defecation. There is excessive rectal discharge and bleeding. The pharyngeal infections are very commonly seen. The patient presents with sore throat. There is, as you can see over here, erythematous pharynx and cervical lymphadenopathy can also be seen, or they could be conjunctivitis. Then we have disseminated gonococcal infections. Disseminated gonococcal infection is a complication of this pathogen of Neisseria gonorrhoeae. In 1 to 3% of the cases, septic emboli can lead to polyarthritis tenosynovitis, where the tendons and the synovial membrane is involved, or they can go and settle down in the large joint, leading to septic arthritis. And this is, as you can see on this slide, the joints become highly inflamed, and if you take out the fluid from this joint, inflamed joint, you are able to identify Neisseria gonorrhoeae or gram-negative diplococci. Then it can also go and settle down in the skin. It is going to lead to papule formation, which finally result in hemorrhagic pustules. And the last is the heart, which can be involved. The heart valve, they will settle down in the heart valves, they damage the heart valve, leading to endocarditis. So here I'm going to end this because in the next lecture I'll be doing the lab diagnosis in detail. The assignment are your MCQs, which you have to attempt before marking your attendance. Coming to the MCQs, which of the following cell components produced by Neisseria gonorrhoeae is responsible for attachment to the host cell? Find out the correct answer from the options given below. The second MCQ is a sexually active 25 years old female presenting with purulent vaginal discharge and dysuria after having unprotected sex. And you have to find out the sensitive diagnosis, the most sensitive diagnostic method to determine the etiological agent. The third MCQ is which is of the following is a common sequelae to gonococcal PID or pelvic inflammatory disease. So in the next lecture I'll be doing the lab diagnosis. Thank you very much.